I want to start with a story. A few months ago, I was talking with someone. I'm going to keep the details vague for anonymity purposes, but who had been going through a really difficult time. Job loss, relationship under strain, the kind of period where everything seems to arrive at once. And they told me something that stopped me in my tracks. They said, I've been talking to ChatGPT about it. Every night before I go to sleep, it seems to help. Now, my first instinct, I'll be honest with you, was concern. Not judgment, but concern, because I know what genuine therapeutic support looks like, and I know what it requires. And a large language model at midnight is just simply not that. But then they said something else. They said, I know it's not a real person, but it just doesn't judge me. And right now, that matters more than anything. Welcome back to My BrainWise Coach. I am Cole Bastian.
And I'm Phil Dixon. And today we're going to spend 20 minutes on a question that's no longer theoretical. Millions of people, and that's not an exaggeration, I mean millions, the research has become very clear on this, are using AI as a counselor, a companion, a friend, and in some cases, a substitute for professional mental health care. And we want to understand why. What does it offer? What doesn't it offer? And what does the brain science tell us about both?
This is not a conversation about whether AI is good or bad. It is a conversation about the brain's needs and what happens when those needs are met by something that is very good at appearing to understand, but does not understand in the way that another human being understands.
So stay with us here. This one truly matters.
So Phil, let's start with the scale of what we're talking about, because I think a lot of people assume that this is a niche thing, a tech-curious fringe perhaps, but the research says something very...
It really does. A study published just this month, led by Bournemouth University in England, involved nearly 31,000 adults across 35 countries. That's a lot in any study. And they asked people how willing they are to use tools like ChatGPT for some of the most important roles in their lives. And the numbers are, depending on how you look at them, either remarkable or truly alarming, or in fact, both.
Let's go through them, because the headline figure people will know is the mental health one, but it is actually not the biggest number.
Correct. The biggest number is attributed to companionship. 3/4 of people globally, 75%, that's huge, said that they will use an AI chat tool as a companion and a friend. In the UK, over half the respondents said the same. That's the number I think we need to sit with for a moment before we move on. Half in the UK and 75% worldwide would use AI chat tool as a companion.
Because friendship that is not a small thing to delegate.
It's not. And the mental health figure, going back to that, 61% of people globally said that would be comfortable using ChatGPT as a mental health counselor. Wow. 61%. In the UK, where the waiting times for healthcare services run to months, that figure is 41%, which sounds a little lower, but it actually still represents millions of people.
And a separate survey from the Centio program in the US, published in Practice Innovations, which is an APA peer-reviewed journal, found that among people with ongoing mental health conditions who already use AI, nearly half, or 41%, are already using it specifically for therapeutic support. Not would they, are they?
And to put that in perspective, the Veterans Health Administration, one of the largest institutional mental health providers in the United States, treats about 1.7 million people a year. If the Centio survey results are even roughly representative, the number of Americans using AI chatbots for mental health support is of a comparable order. So ChatGPT may already be the largest mental health provider in the United States. Not the best, simply the largest.
That sentence is worth repeating because, it's such a powerful statement. So the question is, why? Why are people turning to something that they know is not a human therapist in such enormous numbers?
And the Bournemouth study gives us a very clear answer. The researchers there found that the non-judgmental quality of AI responses combined with the sense of privacy and the tool's ability to remember previous conversations, creates what they describe as simply a sense of security. Their lead researcher, Dr. whose name I cannot pronounce, Alla Yankuskaya, puts it very well. She says, AI tools come across as a friend who knows you well and understands you. And she adds in, nowadays people can be very sensitive to being judged, and AI tools are designed to be non-judgmental. This means they can provide the sense of security people need.
And from a neuroscience perspective, Phil, that is not nothing, is it?
It's absolutely, that's a strange way of putting it, but it's absolutely not nothing. The brain's social pain circuitry, I'll give you the details if you want, but that circuitry processes the fear of being judged with the same urgency as physical pain. Wow, so you hurt yourself, happens immediately. That same social pain circuitry is very, very rapid. When someone's in distress and afraid to be seen in that distress, the removal of judgment is a genuine neurological relief. The brain doesn't fully register that the absence of judgment is because the entity being spoken to is incapable of it. It simply registers the relief. And relief is a powerful reinforcer.
Phil, let's go a little deeper into the neuroscience of this, because I think what is interesting is not just that people are doing it, it's the specific thing that they are looking for. And I'm going to say this name wrong, the Bournemouth study has a hierarchy: companionship first, mental health second, doctor third, and teacher last. Why is it in that order?
No, because that's the order that the brain processes stuff in. It's called the social priority system. The brain doesn't go to AI for expertise first. It goes to AI for connection. Companionship, that's what we heard earlier on. The feeling of being heard, the sense that someone is attending to you. These are primary needs. The need for information, for diagnosis and teaching, they're secondary. What the hierarchy is telling us that the people are turning to AI for the thing that human social infrastructure has most consistently failed to provide at the scale and the availability that our brains need.
And we are in a loneliness epidemic right now that is well documented by
Deeply documented. And the MIT research that's been looking at this is particularly interesting and, quite frankly, concerning. They found that people who are lonely are more likely to consider ChatGPT a friend and spend large amounts of time using it, while also reporting increased sense of loneliness. So the very condition that drives people to AI may be worsened by the use of AI. The brain's seeking connection is getting something that stimulates connection without providing the neurological substance behind it.
What is the neurological substance that is missing in AI?
Several things. Genuine attunement. The real-time, what we call co-regulation of two nervous systems that occurs in a good therapeutic relationship, where the therapist's regulated presence actually helps to downregulate the client's threat system. We have a thing called the mirror neurons in our brains, and that activation comes from being physically present with someone who is genuinely attending to you. The trust that comes from knowing the other party has skin in the game too, like a genuine friend, that they actually care what happens to you, because they are a person who has chosen this work, chosen to be there with you. And the safety of genuine confidentiality, not a privacy policy, not a piece of software that's been written in, but a human relationship governed by professional ethics and legal accountability.
And yet, people report finding it helpful. The Santa Clara University research published in JMIR Mental Health found that most all users found ChatGPT at least somewhat helpful for emotional support. The reasons they gave included feeling connected, feeling relieved, and the sense of free expression, or being able to say what they actually felt without editing themselves.
Which is real. I want to be honest about that, because I think a nuanced conversation acknowledges what is genuinely there rather than dismissing the whole thing. The relief of non-judgment is real. It's heavy duty. The availability at 3 a.m. when no human therapist is accessible, that's a real situation. If you wake up, You can't phone your friends, you can't phone your therapist, but you can log on to ChatGPT. And there's a guy called Douglas Menin, who's a professor of clinical psychology at Columbia Teachers College, puts it this way, and I'll quote, "Because generative AI chatbots are coded to be affirming, there is a validating quality to responses, which is a huge part of relational support." He adds the following, "Unfortunately, in the world, people don't often get that. And that's the honest truth of it. Many people don't know how to be genuinely present and supportive. A lot of people are not getting that genuine relational validation from the humans around them, and they're finding something approximate from a machine."
But, and that is a significant but,
The same affirmation that makes it feel supportive is, in certain situations, dangerous. The Columbia research is clear on this, and I quote again, "AI chatbots, including ChatGPT, when given prompts simulating people experiencing suicidal thoughts, delusions, hallucinations, or mania, have been shown to validate delusions and encourage dangerous behavior." The exact opposite of what we're trying to do. The researchers' conclusion was unambiguous. The potential for serious harm means AI is simply not ready to replace a trained therapist.
and in my personal opinion, they may not ever be able to fully or actually replace a trained therapist. And in this case, we're not talking about hypothetical harm.
Unfortunately, we're not. These are real cases that have ended in tragedy, where AI interactions have escalated rather than reduce the risk of someone in acute crisis. The brain in an acute crisis needs human co-regulation. It needs a real nervous system, regulated and present, to help bringing it back from the edge. A language model that's optimized for affirming responses is not that. It can't be that, because that would require it to go into the opposite direction of what it's been programmed to do. And the gap seems to be, and actually is, widest exactly at the moment when it matters most.
And there is another dimension to this that I want to make sure that we cover, Phil, because it goes beyond mental health into something broader about how AI may be changing the brain itself. The Bournemouth study, which I'm probably pronouncing that wrong still, researchers raised something that I found really interesting about the hippocampus.
And we'll come back to your pronunciation in a bit, but yeah, and that's where the conversation has to expand from mental health into cognition more generally. The concern from the neuroscience community is what they call cognitive outsourcing. If we progressively delegate to AI the tasks that require memory, learning, reasoning, creative problem solving, we may be under-exercising the neural circuits that provide memory, learning, reasoning, and creative problem solving. Not something we want to do. The brain part which is central to memory formation and spatial navigation is use dependent. It's use it or lose it. Brains, there's an old adage in the neuroscience world, brains that fire together, wire together. So the more we actually use it, the more the things get wired together. The research on search engine use has shown associations with engaged activity of the memory circuits. And I read, AI use, which is far more comprehensive cognitive proxy than a search engine, raises the same question at a much larger scale.
And the Bournemouth study found that a quarter of UK adults would delegate the teaching of their children to AI, which is, it just mind boggles me. And it makes me so afraid for humanity. And this is the number that knocked, I cannot say the name, the doctor that we've been talking about, down in her work.
And what she identifies is as the specific risk is not that AI cannot convey information. Of course it can, and it does so very well. It's that the process of learning, of struggling with material, of making mistakes, correcting them, and of encoding that information through effort, that's the process that gives the hippocampus a workout. If AI does the cognitive heavy lifting, the child's brain may become very good at composing prompts, but very unpracticed, the deeper encoding that turns information into knowledge. We could be and I want to be careful to say this is a risk, not a certainty, developing children who are good at asking AI questions, but less good at thinking without it.
And that's a very scary thought to think about the possibility of that occurring, which brings us back to the mental health question in a very different way. Because the capacity for self-regulation, for sitting with difficulty, for processing emotion without immediately seeking self-relief, that is also a cognitive and emotional capability that develops through practice. And if AI provides instant emotional relief on demand, do we risk underdeveloping the brain's own regulatory capacity?
And that's a great question. It's the one I think the researchers should be focusing on at the moment. We don't actually have the answers in the data yet, but the question is really urgent.
So where does this leave us? Because I don't want to end a conversation like this with AI is bad, human is, good, which to some degree, AI has got its place, right? But humans should always take the forefront, because the reality is more complicated than simply AI is bad and humans are good. And the reality is that the mental health system in most countries is not meeting the need of its people. The waiting times are real, the cost is real, the stigma is real. For a lot of people, an AI at midnight is the only option available, or so they believe.
And that's true. And one of the things I would say is to guide our BrainWise listeners back to our podcast with Tanya, I think it was last week, where she talks about how you can maintain agency in an AI world. But we have to start somewhere, because the conversation about AI and mental health can't be separated from the conversation about mental health, agency, capacity. Dr. Yanko Guskara puts it very honestly, and I quote again, if someone is experiencing depression, they don't want to wait for months for an appointment, so instead they can turn to AI within minutes. That's not a technology issue, that's a healthcare system problem that technology is filling.
So given that reality, what does the brain science tell us about how to use these tools wisely? If someone is listening to us right now and they have been using ChatGPT for emotional support, what would you say to them?
Well, I'd say the following. It's not without value, but also be aware that it's not without risk. And the difference between those two things depends on what you're using it for and what state you're in when you reach for it. For processing a difficult day, for thinking through a relationship problem, for articulating what you're feeling when you're not ready to say it to another person, that can be a genuine thing to use it for. The brain sometimes need to get an external opinion about its experience before it can process it. If AI provides a safe space for that externalization, then it's important to you.
But
you knew I was going to say a but, didn't you?
I sure did. I knew it was coming.
But if you're in genuine crisis, if your threat system is fully activated, if you're having thoughts that scare you, if you're using AI as a substitute for human connection because human connection feels too risky or just too unavailable, that's when what AI can offer is at its most dangerous. These, whatever they call them, large language models, can't co-regulate your nervous system. It will always reflect back to you words that are affirming what you're doing. And if what you're doing is not the right thing for you, then you can get into trouble. Affirmation is not the same thing as co-regulation. And in an acute crisis, that gap can become catastrophic.
From a pure brain science perspective, the non-judgmental quality that makes AI feel safe is also a limitation. A good therapist pushes back. A good therapist notices what you are not saying, as well as what you are. And a good therapist tolerates the silence until you find the real thing. AI is optimized to keep you in the conversation. Those are not the same orientation.
And Columbia research are very explicit about this. They said, as you just said, Cole, a good therapist does a lot of things. Amongst other things, they push back. It's not, they just don't go along with what you're saying. The affirmation that makes AI feel supportive is the same quality that makes it potentially dangerous for someone who needs to be challenged, redirected, reframed, or told that what they're feeling is not actually a factual account of reality.
Deadline from us, and we'll put the sources for everything that we've quoted today in the show notes, is this. AI is meeting a real need that the mental health system is unfortunately failing to meet at this time. That is the honest truth. And it is meeting that need imperfectly, in ways that are sometimes helpful and sometimes carry genuine risk. The brain science does not tell us to stop. It tells us to be clear-eyed about what we're actually getting and about what we still need from human beings that a large language model cannot provide. And I'll put this kind of final caveat on before we summarize, Phil. We do, the brain science does not tell us to stop, but I personally would tell you to stop. If you feel like you are in a place and it is affirming all of the negative thoughts that you may be having, then at that point, there is absolutely no need for you to have a conversation, in my opinion, with AI. Instead, find a resource that you can use that can help co-regulate, but also redirect those thoughts and those potentially harmful actions.
And what I would add,
So, Phil, before we
add to that statement is we're not mental health therapists either. So we're just giving you what our interpretation is of the brain science.
Right. Exactly. And so before we go, Phil, I want to come back to the person that I mentioned at the start of this conversation. The one who told me that they had been talking to ChatGPT every night. After they said it doesn't judge me, and right now that matters more than anything, I asked them more question. I asked, is there a person in your life you could say the same things to? And they thought about it, and they said, maybe, I just haven't tried. That is the conversation I think this technology is pointing us toward. Not away from human connection, but instead toward it. If AI is the bridge, the place people practice being honest before they try being honest with another person, that might be its best use case. The question is whether that bridge becomes the destination.
The brain is a social organ. It evolved through relationships. We regulate our brains through relationships. We find meaning through relationships. AI can simulate many of those things. It cannot simulate what it actually feels like to be truly known by another person who's chosen to show up for you, not because they were programmed to, because they decided to. That's irreplaceable. And we think about how we integrate these tools into our lives, that irreplaceability is what I want us to most protect.
Thank you for being with us today. If this conversation has prompted something for you, a question, a reflection, a conversation you've been putting off, we would love to hear about it. You know where to find us. You can send us an email at questions@mybrainwisecoach.com. You can leave us a comment in the chat of one of our social platforms at mybrainwisecoach if you feel comfortable doing so. And as always, if you found use in this podcast or any of our discussions, like, comment, share, subscribe, rate, and review wherever it is you're getting our podcast or where you follow us on social media, because it does help grow our BrainWise community.
And I'll say it this time, as always, stay curious, stay compassionate, and always stay BrainWise.
BrainWise.